I think. Maybe. Don't know. Only one to find out. I think everything's working. Double checking. Right. So, FPS Basics. Just to recap, right, what we've spoken about is just overall like aiming, putting things into classes like assault, machine, and like sniper, and then putting in like aim techniques that kind of belong to there, and then talking about all like the movements that you do when you're sitting upwards in a chair or with a desk. Like we've so far spoken just about the human body and like everything that's connected to it, right? Like muscle memory, and just talking about like how you properly orientate yourself around, like making sure that you have the right techniques in order to enable yourself in like any given FPS game. Like I'm mostly talking about Overwatch because I was an Overwatch coach, but this can be applied to pretty much every single FPS game that there is, right? So when you're actually going for, like, let's say an well, it's SR called like MMR, match rating, like going for a higher tier, so it's like you have like ranks like diamonds, such. Pretty sure that's like that in every game, like Rainbow Six Siege. You have up to diamond, I believe, there, maybe Crawl Master, I don't quite remember what it was like there. And then you have like Apex that goes up to like Master, and then you have Overwatch up to Grandmaster. Like everything is rank based. At least when you're climbing a ladder, it's just like with chess, you have like a ladder with a certain elo that connects you to like a certain tier that you personally as a player belong in, right? Like it's something special. It's just that is the way it is when you're playing a game that has like a rank system, that has an esport in it. There's always going to be a rank ladder that determines where you sort of belong based on your own personal performance, because obviously there's a match rating for that. So based off of what we've spoken about for the past 2 weeks, so to say, like with aim techniques and all that, how do you actually like put yourself in there? Like, sure, you can make like a schedule, like you can make an agenda and make things easy for yourself, or you can just say, I'm going to do this. And then this is kind of like the key thing with Overwatch, right? Like in Overwatch, just to put it into perspective, you have a lot of burnouts in Overwatch. Like just going in the first page, like Seagull burned out, and like there were so many people that burn out in Overwatch, and that's because when people went into Overwatch, like this specific game where the esport just kind of crumbled due to poor management and poor decision making from the company that is in charge. The first things that kind of happened was people burning out, and it just kept happening over and over. And the people that are less affected by that are mostly Asians. And that's not really a racist thing to say. It's more the reason Asians are better at us in like mostly esports, because Asians at a core perspective, you see it even during COVID. Like during COVID, you can see them, they have this self-discipline. They're very self-disciplined people. Like they can make decision choices, and they will work very hard for those type of things, because that is just, it's their culture. Like they are just kind of not necessarily born that way, but that's just how they grow up. They grow up with that, like, do you have to just work hard in order to achieve your things? In Europe and like in the West in general, it's very different. That's where you have things like this, right? Like this is what I had in university, like SMART goals. Obviously, even when I was in university, I was like, fuck this shit. But it's more of an overall, because when you get this university, you're actually forced to write every fucking thing that you want in this thing. I'm not like that. I don't really enjoy having to write everything down. It's like a waste of time to me. But this is more to put a perspective on what you want, right? So for example, let's say I want to reach like the semi-professional level of any given FPS game. Now, what do you need for this? Well, that's what we've spoken about for the past 2 weeks, right? Like it doesn't really matter how you sit or anything, as long as you're comfortable with your mouse, and then you focus on making the muscle memory work for you on those specific aims. So it's all about aim and all that. So that's the first thing you have to do, right? Like you have to make the very first step that you're making is literally just to make sure that your mechanical skill allows you to get to that level, right? Like that's just the very basics. Like you have to put yourself into kind of like the shoes of your previous goers. Like I use Pine a lot, for example. He easily has thousands of hours into like practicing aim. Like even when you see like pro players warm up, you see them using programs like Kovacs, you see them using programs like Sure for Use, Makasu. Like there's practice programs out there to make sure that your reflexes are there, your aiming is there. So that's the first thing you have to do. You have to decide, okay, like based on what we said in the first time was like, which class are you? The very first thing you have to do, okay, which specific aiming techniques do I need in order to allow myself to become a better player? So for example, if you're a sniper, the very first things that you're going to do is like, I want to be a sniper master level. Like, let's just start there, right? Just start there. First thing you need is, okay, I need to have the reflexes and the reaction time in order to make either small flicks or like big flicks. That's mostly what you're focused. You're mostly focused on beating the other team sniper, right? Like that's mostly the case in most games. Like you need strong reflexes with a very fast reaction time that are capable of you just executing small flicks. And these are all things that you can practice. Like if you're looking at like certain pro players, doesn't matter which FPS game, if you look at pro players and you see them do amazing things, you're like, this is absolutely insane. They're geniuses. This is like a god. I can't do this. That's just not true. Most of them, you can be just like them. It's actually very simple as long as you stick to your guts, don't burn out, and like have this self-discipline in order to reach your certain goals, right? So first thing you would do is be specific. Like, what do you want to reach? Like, okay, I want to be semi-professional. What do I need? And that's where you're going to start. Then you have to measure it. Like, you kind of need to have something where you can evaluate. And that's why what I did with many players was I forced them to give me screenshots. Like with some players, I will literally have just nothing but screenshots, right? Like it would just be like, let's just grab a random, like let's this person, for example, like nothing but screenshots. This is how you measure just over time, like what you're working on. Like it's just nothing but this. Like you're just focusing on that very specific given thing. Like you want to measure whether or not your player is doing it. So he has a specific goal, and that was to be like the best he possibly can, which is a very good goal to have. And then you want to enable that. So you want to like have a certain measure table that you can actually use for your certain player. This more as a coach, but for you yourself, you can do this as well. Just to have this on a piece of paper or as a screenshot, just for you to look at, okay, am I improving? Like, am I actually doing things? Like, am I actually achieving progress, so to say? Like, am I getting somewhere where I want to get? That is how you want to start measuring things. So that can be in anything, like and like also you have scores. They keep a track of like what you're doing. In Kovacs, they have scores. They get track of what you're doing, like accuracy and points and all that. They're not extremely relevant. It's just so that you have like an idea, because the moment you enter your actual game and you practice in your actual game and you start doing these like specific things, you're not going to have like a direct way of saying like, I am improving. Like, oh, of course your elo is going to go up. That's like the first thing, right? Like, even though, like, for example, if you're like let's say you're gold, right? Like if you say it's around you're below average or average, that's the type of player you are. Like that's the level that you are at. When you would start with these simple things, like just having these two first, right? Like the S and the M. So you have specific, you're measuring things. You were probably within like a period of 2 months, let's say 2 months, you would rise from gold. It's usually platinum that comes after that, and then diamond. And diamond is kind of like where the people that are slightly above average are. And these are the people that have put in effort. These are the people that have tried to improve a little bit. And these are people that then, because they have improved a little bit, they suddenly think that they're the best players in the world, which is just complete nonsense. So you do have to be realistic. But once you've done like the first few steps, the first thing, like even without aim, like aim you can measure with like a program like Kovacs and like also, or FPS also was also called. It's a mod and also where you're focusing on FPS. You can measure your aim, and then the game will kind of measure like your MMR, which is then slowly increasing. But you will hit a wall. And that's kind of like what we spoke about last week. Like last week it was more about like consistency. Like how much does it take to consistently improve or to maintain? Or was it 2 weeks ago? Like we talked about like maintaining your certain level of ability or improving upon that. And that's kind of like in between, right? Like when you're improving, eventually you will hit a wall, and then you have to like be realistic. Like if you're only gonna, let's say you do 2 times per week. If you're only gonna do the like practice 2 times per week and you want to reach semi-professional level, this is not happening. Period. It's not happening. It's extremely unrealistic. Like you're not gonna be able to attain the goal you're setting for yourself. Like sure, this also goes about time frame and all that, but that's irrelevant because when you're practicing only twice per week, when the opposite people at the same professional level are practicing, let's say 5 to 7 times per week, based on like their own schedule, because obviously there are people there that have lives or like need to work and provide for themselves, pay rent and all that. But they're still like heavily practicing. If you want to reach their level, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen because you don't practice enough. Like the way muscle memory works is if you're only practicing twice a week, the only real thing you're doing is making sure you stay in the certain elo that you're at. So for example, you've done this and you've done this, you now are slightly above average, and then in Overwatch you would now become diamond. You're not gonna climb anymore. Like this is like you're now hard stuck. That's also what's called. Like you often heard this, right? Like this word comes it even in MOBAs and everything. Like hard stuck is a very common word that you hear being passed around. Being hard stuck is literally you're not able to reach a higher level anymore. Like you've reached like the maximum capacity of what you're able to reach with the amount of time you're putting into achieving your goals, so to say. And this is usually where you see 2 people, right? Like you have one person that starts raging. Everyone has seen them. These are these raging kids, or there's even man children out there that just think that I don't belong here, I belong higher. Everyone has probably seen them. These people that have an ego so far up their ass, they believe that they're just the best players in the world, when in reality they're just stuck. They're never going to climb, and that's just period, because they're not working towards improving anymore. And instead of working towards improving, instead of building the self-discipline and like increasing your own capabilities, they've started becoming toxic in a way where they blame others for their own shortcomings. And in Overwatch, what you very much see is people that say this, like join voice chat, because for whatever reason they do watch pros and all that, so they have this idea that they can just tell other people what to do in order to win games, which is complete nonsense. Like I'm one of the players that never joins voice chats because it's just a waste of my time. Like I don't feel like listening to other people pretend that they're actually capable of working out in like sensible words what they want to achieve. On top of that, Overwatch is a very fast-paced game, so it's pretty pointless anyway. But you get what I mean. These type of players, everyone has run into them. They start making excuses. They start making like reasons, like you suck, or like you're not doing your job, or like you're just being bad. Even when in reality, he himself, because of how he set like these goals, right, like these first 3, like specific, measurable, and attainable, because of how little he puts into actually improving, he's never gonna actually be able to like increase any of his capabilities. On top of that, he's built a victim type of mentality where it's just blaming others, which is ridiculous, but you see those people. Everyone has seen them. So how do you avoid that? Well, this is why I'm kind of using this, right? You need to be self-disciplined. Like you need to have that realization that if you're only going to work 2 times per week, you're not going to reach anywhere. However, if you do this 4 times per week, 4 times per week, this is like, I want to say the golden standard, but it's like the absolute minimum that you should be doing in order to actually reach greater heights. Because now you're actually forcing your body to be like, I want to improve, I want to become better, and I want to work for it. And I'm going to continuously work like at least 4 times per week, and I'm going to work towards goals. The only difference between you and a player that becomes pro faster is the amount of time frame you give yourself on how fast you want to reach that level. That's the only difference. Like you both are very self-disciplined people. Like one person has decided to do 7 times per week and has decided I'm going to work my ass off and do everything that I possibly can in order to reach the level that I want. But that's not necessarily, of course, it's going to go fast, especially when you take this into account. Like, age is a very important factor. But you're both going to be able to reach that level eventually. Like, for example, this person that does 4 times a week, eventually he's going to be top 500, right? Doesn't really matter which game. Eventually, if he puts in that much consistent practice and consistently works on his improvements and consistently has a self-discipline in order to have that goal be achieved within his time frame. Like, let's say this person wants to reach top 500 in, let's say, 2 years. That's a very, very long time for anyone. Like, it doesn't matter what age you are. 2 years is long. Whereas the person that does 7 times per week, he wants to do this in 6 months. The only difference is that this person is going to reach his level in the same time frame that he gives himself. So like 6 months, it's kind of realistic. Like, of course, there's still the other part where you actually have to like have social connection, all that, in order to actually do become a pro in esports. But that's a whole different story. As long as you have the mechanic and game sense that is required for your level, that's all you need. That's the first step. And hello, Chiz.
Hey.
You are very loud.
I'm always this loud. I haven't changed anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably my son. Anyway, where was I? Yeah. So practicing towards a certain goal. Putting all this into account, right? Like, you have now done the specific. So the specific is I want to become semi-pro, right? That's what we start with. In the esports scene, FPS specific, I want to become semi-pro. Then you measure it. So measuring is very simple. FPS game, it's all about aim. That's the very first step. The first thing you need is aim. If you don't have aim, then why are you even bothering? Like, you can become like have the best game sense in the world, but that makes you more of a coach than a player. Like, for example, at my peak in my career as an esport player, my aim was all right. Like, I wouldn't say it was the best, but it was all right. I have more games in, but that's because of my role. Like, I was an off tank in Overwatch specific. That kind of meant that I was more like I was also a shot caller. I was more of a like outside perspective, focusing on the actual strategy. But that's like a whole different story when you're actually getting into scrims. So it's kind of irrelevant for this specific goal setting. So FPS is all about aim. Once you've like reached this, what most players say is that you need 2 years in order to reach pro level aim. For pro level, so pro level. And if you look at most pro players that you see in Call of Duty, you see in Battlefield, you see it in Overwatch, you see it in Apex, you see it in pretty much any FPS you can think of. 2 years is kind of like the golden standard that anyone has. And yes, you can speed this up, and that is what I just said, right? Like how much you train per week. So 2 times, 4 times, and then 7 times. So it's kind of like you've now set this for yourself. Now you just need to make it a reality. That's self-discipline. This is where, especially in Overwatch, you see the problem. Everyone is just burning out in Overwatch, and that's because of how that game is just forcing your brain to continuously adapt over a long period of time, whereas other games don't have that. So you see burnouts, and it doesn't matter how much self-discipline you have. Like, you need to have some serious things to fall back upon if you want to like make sure that you don't burn out. Just to make it clear, anyone, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter if you're Asian, doesn't matter if you're Caucasian, doesn't matter if you're like African, doesn't matter what you are. Anyone can become a pro player. Okay, maybe age is kind of included. Yeah, if you're like 60 years old and you are touching your mouse for the first time, big difference. But like I'm talking about for like people that are like between 10 and let's say 40. 35. Let's keep it there. You can become pro. Like there was this pro boxer with 40 plus. Okay, let's move not here. But there was a boxer that debuted like 2 years ago. He was in his 40s. Never boxed in his life. Never practiced in his life. Not gonna say practice. He did obviously do some sports. Can I find this? Guess not. Oh, there we go. Or not. There we go. Yes. Okay, maybe it was a few more years ago. So it kind of depends on like what you're willing to do. Like obviously, once you're too old, but there's still like a certain limit that you can give yourself. So this person, I'm not really fully reading it. I don't think it's this person, but like an old man made his pro debut, despite the fact that he was like in his 40s. That's sheer determination, like it's sheer progress, it's sheer discipline in order to just do these things, right? Like I'm just formulating it. Like this is just a formula that you can use. Like this is not an absolute. This is just to put it into perspective what you actually need in order to attain your goals and what it takes. That specific pro player, like he was practicing 7 days a week. Eventually he made it. Did it cost him a lot of time? Well, yeah, it did. But apparently he had that time. And if you have the determination, you have the discipline in order to put yourself into that, obviously you're going to get a lot of scorn to pro debut at such a late age. But that's irrelevant. Like you're not doing it for other people, you're doing it for yourself. That's like the first thing. So when you're in this certain level, the self-discipline that you're, like if you do this consistently will build up. Because what you see often is people not having the discipline to follow through with what they're doing. And this is the difference between Asians and Europeans. Like you see it often in League of Legends, you see it in like Dota, you see it in like any other game where you just suddenly see like Asians pop off. That's because they are self-disciplined to the point where they're putting in the efforts to reach the goals that they're setting for themselves. And yes, that's difficult. And yes, it's kind of a mindset, right? Like you need to put yourself into that mind. And obviously you see it with soldiers as well. Soldiers are drilled so extremely hard from the start in order to make sure that it takes around 6 weeks of consistently doing something before your brain is like, hey, we should do this. It's kind of like the same with soldiers, right? Like they have like a 2-month period where they're just being drilled like several types of things. And then eventually they're like, okay, now they are used to these things and start either increasing or decreasing. Well, so soldiers, obviously, you increase. And that's kind of where your goal comes in. Like, what do you want, right? For example, Chiz at this stage should already be pro player, but for some reason, I don't know how his aim looks nowadays or his skill, but he's not a consistent player in the top 100. It's kind of like, what is his goal, right? What does he want to achieve? For each individual, it's different. But if you were to keep this up, eventually he will become a pro player. At least by pro standards. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, sure, you can say you're a pro player without actually being contracted to a pro team. It just means you've reached that level, and now the only thing that's left is being contracted, so to say. But that's all completely different story, because then you need social connection. So this is all about just reaching the mechanic and game sense level. So now you've done all of this, right? Like, you've done the self-discipline, you are consistently practicing the same periods that you're doing every single week for the same amount of time. You're slowly increasing your elo, you're slowly increasing your skills. At some point, you probably feel more confident that you're capable of, like, something that you would see often with players. Like, they've been, like, let's say you've been steadily improving for like 6 months, and you are now masters, and you are dropped down back to platinum for whatever. Like, let's say you make a Smurf, you would instantly feel like this is a joke. You have to realize that 6 months ago, you were with them, barely winning games, struggling. So you see that improvement over time as well. And that is also something you have to give yourself, like, a pat on the back. Like, be proud of your progress. Like, be proud of what you've achieved so far. Then you reach next step. And this is different for everyone. Like, what I did 2 years, right? I had a 2-year plan, and I had a 2-year goal, and after that I would quit. And I was let's say it was 2018 around spring when I started, and it was 2020 around spring when I quit. I did 1 year, no, not 1 and 2, I would say. 1.5 year of a player. And I made it to, in Overwatch, it's called Tier 3. And then I did like, really, let's say around 10 months of coach. This is what I did, right? Like, it's a bit longer than 2 years, but the overall idea was that I was only going to do this for 2 years and see where I would get. So, for example, if I actually made it all the way, then I would probably still be in the system. But because I didn't, well, I had better things to do. And, well, I kind of achieved what I wanted to achieve, which is the semi-professional to professional level. And I was satisfied with that. I'm not necessarily completely satisfied, but the main reason I quit was because of the game. Like, I would have continued on, not as a coach, but as a player, if it wasn't for Blizzard. But that's just the way it is. Things happen. Nothing you can do. But my goals were aligned with my long-term objectives. I gave myself 2 years in order to reach a certain level, and I reached those goals, right? And this is for everyone. Like, you need to give yourself a certain period of time of where you want to be at a certain given time and how much time you're going to give it. So, for example, going back into like how realistic something is, because that's like the last step. How realistic something is. If you're going to practice 4 times per week, and you want to become a pro in, let's say, 6 months, it's not going to happen. The reason is very simple. You don't put enough time to have a realistic goal in order to reach your goals. This is not enough, because, and that's the main reason you also see burnouts. It's because there are people in, like, let's say tier 2 that are easily practicing 7 times per week for let's say 7 hours per day. How are they doing that? Who knows? Like, there's parents that say, okay, you want to do this for a year, go for it. Or they just are capable of doing it some way or another. These players, they exist. And if they're already in tier 2, that already means that the last step they need to achieve is tier 1. So they're already doing this. They're already putting in everything. So here you come with your 4 times per week. You don't stand a chance to these people. And it can be demotivating. It can be annoying. It can be frustrating. And I've probably seen many people quit at this stage as well. Just because it takes so many time for such little reward. That's like the other part of why Overwatch felt so badly. But it's Overwatch. Like in other games, like let's say Rainbow Six Siege, you see a very healthy scene in the esports scene where people are either doing this and they're slowly working towards reaching tier 2, or they're already tier 2 and they are just casually doing this. And they're winning tournaments, or they're going to tournaments and maybe not winning but becoming second place and then being frustrated. And then you need the self-discipline in order to put yourself back into the working shoes, making it so that you are once again working towards your goals, which is then be professional. This is something you saw in I think it was League of Legends. I don't remember if it was a Chinese or a Korean player. It was a player that's remember his name. It was a player that everyone thought he should be a champion. Like, he was so ridiculously good at the game that it made no sense for him not to be a champion. Yet it took him a very long time to actually reach that goal. Not necessarily because of himself. Like, he actually did burn down at some point. Like, he got frustrated with himself. He was like, why am I not winning? And that's kind of like where your own mindset comes into play. And eventually, because he kept on working, kept on putting in the hours, kept on putting in the practice, he did become a champion. Like, he ended up becoming world champion. And that is as long as you put this into it, right? Like, he had his goals aligned with everything that he wanted to do. He put in the practice, he put in the schedule for everything that he had with a self-discipline, and he became one of the best players in the world on a specific hero or like a set of heroes in League of Legends. And doing all of this almost like he didn't do this specifically, but you can put people's mindset into like a diagram like this. He ended up becoming world champion. It just took longer than he wanted. Like, that is something that can just happen. Like, he had a realistic date. Like, he was a pro player and his mechanics were among the best on the planet, yet his end goal of becoming world champion took longer than he wanted. And that can happen. Like, let's say you make a 2-year schedule, like you have 2 years, and based on everything that happens within these 2 years, like not everything is going to go according to plan, right? Like you now have all of these things. Not everything is going to go according to plan. You can have things that happen in between these things where you need like a plus 6 months. It can happen. You can have setbacks. You can have frustration times. You can like burn yourself out and then completely hate the game, or you already start hating the game, or like you're frustrated with a certain system. Like there's always things that will happen in any sport. Like you're unsatisfied, or you're just not happy with the changes that are being brought into the game. Those things happen. Like, there's nothing you can do about it. Those things just simply happen. And then you get an extension of time, 6 months. Maybe you need another 6 months after that. But from the start, like what we started with, let's say semi-pro was the goal, and you gave yourself 2 years, practicing 4 times per week. And let's say what level around this is. This is around 4.5k in Overwatch, right? Just to put it into numbers, right? Consistently, right? So because you can't just say I'm 4.5k once and then pretend you're actually at this level. No, it takes proper time. I don't know about now. Like I looked at the ladder. I saw top 500 players were already 4k at the end of the season. So I don't know what it's like now, but a year ago, for the past from 2018 to 2019 at least, this was like the semi-pro level. People were consistently around this level. And yeah, you can go you can go up or you can go down. Doesn't really matter, as long as you're consistently within the rank of people that are the same level as you, and you're consistently either beating them or you're performing well enough where you are consistent enough to show that even though you lost that game, you yourself did the best. And this is something you see in football as well, right? Like in football, what you have, like you have these L players on your own team, they get scores. And they're already pro players, right? Like I say, look at Barcelona. Like everyone in there, you have 11 players, all of them are like pro. They get paid ridiculous salaries, so you can definitely assume that they're pro. But at the end of the game, they still get scores. And that goes from 0 to 10, obviously. And each game, let's say you're a 8 at average. Well, this is something that is good enough for Barca, right? Like Barca has a team where if you're an age average, which means you're overperforming every single game, you will definitely have a spot in the team. And obviously then there's players like, just put it to say Messi as like an average, well, not now, but back in the day when he was at his prime, like really popping off, he had like an average of a 9. He was that good. Like he was just insane. Obviously he has games where he was a bit worse, but that's just human behavior. Like humans are like that. So consistently being at that progress where you are steadily, consistently being at your level, you can set a new goal. Like you've now achieved semi-pro level, right? Like you are mechanically and aim-wise, you are a semi-pro. Obviously, if you want to go anything beyond this, you would have to scrim. There's just no two ways about it. Like you need to scrim to become a true semi-pro. So mechanically and game sense wise, you've reached the semi-pro level, and to become a true semi-pro, which means because FPS games, they're team. There is no one person that can just well, there are people that can make the difference, but there's no one person that can carry everything. Like he alone is not enough to win games. So if you want to now reach the next level, you need to once again set all of these goals, look over everything again, and then repeat the process. Like, what do you want to reach? Do you want to become pro? Do you want to become a champion? Do you want to become just an average Andy that does funny stuff? That's something that you can put the friend in. In Overwatch, the friend was just kind of like a troll, right? When he was in the pro scene, like he was a pro, he knew to scrim, he knew how to do things. He had no experience on the hero he was playing. He just fucked around. Kind of depends. What do you want to do? Do you want to do red stuff? Do you want to do serious stuff? It kind of depends on you year round. Like once you've reached this level, you can now start deciding what do you actually want. But this is the basis, the very basics. Like we're not going beyond that for now. So that's what this is called, basics. The very basics of reaching your goal. So 4 times is minimum, 7 times is perfect. And then you just need to be able to have enough time to reach your goals. So you need to be specific what do you want to reach. So in FPS, what you need to decide on is, are you an assault? Are you a sniper? Do you prefer close combat? So close quarter combat, it kind of depends, like what do you want? You just decide within this, and then obviously there's guns, like assault is mostly assault rifles, sniper rifles, close quarter combos. This is mostly shotguns and SMGs, submachine guns and shotguns. Very simple, right? Like there's no secret about this. It's just this simple. So now what? Now that I've done all of this, let's pick out. Okay, so Chiz, you've done all of this, now what? Let's say you've done all of this, now what?
All of that?
Yeah.
Then, can you rephrase the question?
So you've done everything that you wanted to do. Now what?
Either you are happy with what you have done and gotten what you wanted, or you set a new goal.
Yep. It's like I said, right? Like you reach semi-pro, you're there, set a new goal, start all over.
Unless you're happy with it and be like, well, I've done what I want, and then you quit.
Yeah, there are players like that. You have players that then become streamers, right? Like for Overwatch, for example. What's a good one? Like Craggy. I think Craggy was a semi-professional to professional player until he went full-time streamer. Like he was in a team before he did streaming. Like he went to tournaments and such. Like you have players like that they just realize, like XQC, that's a good one. Alright, think about it. He was in the Dallasville at one point, right?
I've never really seen him that much. I've more seen him as a streamer the entire time. Never really in the front. Like F4 was bench, you know. Like they had a signed contract with him, but he never really played, did he?
He did. He just this is like a whole different story. Like he was mostly a streamer, and this is how he made a living. Because like if you look at his backstory, like he had a very specific reason for why he did things, and you could say he had toxic behavior, right? Because of this on stream, like for example, after a match, he would go on stream and they say something inappropriate in quotation marks, like he didn't really, but if you take things out of context, everything becomes inappropriate. Yeah. So he got fined and then suspended, and then he served his suspension, played again, did the same thing, and then, well, he technically got fired, so to say. But his goal, like when you look at his way back when he actually started streaming, he was tier 3. I'm pretty sure he was tier 3 when he first started streaming. So he was semi-professional, right? Like he was in the team and he was doing bits and he was performing well. And his goal was to become, not really champion, but pro. Pro was his goal. So from tier 3, you now need to be making goals for that. So first you need tier 2 and then tier 1, right? So then you work on those. But the very basics, like first start, if you really want to do something, doesn't matter what age you are, doesn't matter what type of person you are. Like let's say you only have a laptop and you have no space. That's what we talked about last week, right? Like if you have no proper chair and everything, doesn't matter. As long as you sit somewhat comfortably and you put in the practice, you put in the hours, you can reach a level and a goal that you set for yourself. And all it takes is self-discipline. Just consistently doing every single thing repeatedly over and over again. And that's boring. It's very boring. That's just the way it is. Like, for example, what I did, right? Steve player. D.Va needs to practice bombs. on average, I would say I would do like 1 hour every 2 days. So that's 3 to 4 times per week. Well, my bombs used to be very shit. And let's put it in perspective. Like, you met me in December of 19, right?
I don't remember. When we met. It's been so long.
Was it 18? Yeah, it was 18. Yeah, 18. So in December of 18, that is where I had to start working on all of these. My bombs were shit, my grass was shit, my Zaya was shit, everything was shit, right? I was monsters. 3.5, I think. Yeah, I was just barely masters. Sometimes I dropped the diamond, sometimes I beat it up, and then I put in the time, I put in the hours, right? 6 months period, was it? Because I could practice every single day. Well, you know what happened to my bombs. Everyone knows that. My bombs kill people. Not anymore, obviously, but back in the day, after about 6 months, this went to 4.2. Yeah, I went to 4.2, I believe. Something like that, 4.1, 4.2, something like that. 6 months, yeah. Within 6 months, I went from masters to 4.2, around 4K average, I would say. So I was 4K average, so I had a increase of 500 elo, right? That is just putting in the effort, putting in the discipline, putting in the boring hours of grinding your skills, putting in the boring hours of working on everything that you need to do, and you will climb. For example, you are, I would say, you're also 4K average, aren't you?
It's been a bit down up.
Something like this.
I'm laying 4.8.
Yeah. So your peak is 4.4 or was it 4.3?
Almost 4.4. Was like 2 games off, I believe.
Nah, good enough. Let's just round it up to 4.4 then. So let's just say you were 4.4, right?
Close.
4K average. You were 3K average in 19. So when you met me, you were 500 elo below me average-wise. This is how you got the nickname of Plat.
I'm still flat. I'm leaving that place.
That's the nickname, is that was assigned to you. Practice-wise, well, you've made your own decision, right? Like if we went back to the basics, right? Like to put it into perspective of like I only worked on off-tank specific, and I only worked on my Diva and my Zarya, and eventually my Hawk. That is just what I did, right? You did this times 3. I think you did 6 heroes. Which means you need more time. It means you need to be more flexible with what you're doing. On top of that, you didn't really have a very specific disciplined way of practicing. I know that for a fact. Because what you did mostly was just enter rank, didn't you?
Sometimes I just do like custom games, training game with certain heroes.
Yeah. And this is where the problem kind of comes in, right? Like you have inconsistent practice based on what you're trying to achieve. Because at that time, I don't think you really had a goal. Like, to be perfectly honest, I don't think you had a serious goal at all. I don't think you have a serious goal right now. Like, you don't even know what you want to achieve.
I'm taking great right now. Overwatch is like, have you seen the rank? Like, top 500 is barely 4.1. It's like 1 game off right now.
Yeah, I was laughing at Sendius when I saw that you could see people in 4K that were top 500.
Yeah,
It's just...
the only that matters top 500 is like the top 300 or top 200.
It's even like a year ago, right? The only thing that mattered was top 100. And right now it should probably be top 50 because everyone quit and you have so many Smurfs.
True. It's like even if I get back in top 500, I'm like,
It's not an achievement, really.
Not anymore when you have like 2,000 spots on it.
Yeah. Yeah, that as well.
Then we have deep DPS and support, and they have combined all three.
But to put it in perspective, right? Like, eventually you did join a 4.3k team. That was let's see, consistently. Let's say consistently. So that was after 1 year. After 1 year, not even. It wasn't 1. It was 2. Yeah, no, yeah, it was 1 year. I'm messing up my time. So 1 year. So in 2020, this is when you joined the 4.3k team. So even though you didn't really have a consistent practice, you did play enough in order to improve to the point where you were capable of, like, at least somewhat capable of being at this level, right? Mm-hmm. So you did have a certain amount of self-discipline where you did work towards not really a goal, but like an idea, so to say. Like, you had the idea that you wanted to scrim high, right? Like, you want to be at least a serious player, or at least taken seriously. You did put in a lot of hours. Like, out of all of us, you played ranked the most. That is a fact. Like, I know that for a fact, because Senny and me often talk about it. Like, you had like over 1,000 hours at some point in ranked, way back in 19 already.
Like in total?
Yeah, in total.
Like in a single season? No. Like in
No,
like
100 to 200 per season.
If not more, sometimes.
Yeah. So on a discipline-based type thing, even though you weren't putting in the practice for your mechanics, which was very obvious when I started coaching you, you lacked consistent mechanical ability, which is why I forced you to do a very specific thing, which was the Reddit Lucio. And you became good at that specific thing, which is just wall riding, messing around and causing chaos for the enemy and being all over the place and making sure that you pick out targets. You know, putting like a goal towards a player in order for him to improve, and you became better at that specific thing. I don't know if you still do it now, but that is how you put self-discipline into like a certain hero, right? Yeah. And it works the same with aim. Like, it works the same with everything that you're doing. Like, if you have the self-discipline to work on what you're doing, first thing is hours. The second thing is goal. Third thing is then making sure you have the techniques. This is something that I spoke about with some of my hit scans, where I said there is a tennis player. You probably know of him. Almost everyone knows this guy. Roger Federer. Considered one of the best, if not the best player of all time in the tennis world. When you looked at his techniques, the things that they're often said that his, like, I'm not going to call it the techniques because nobody probably knows them, but like one of his techniques was like the third. Oh, that's an awful term. One of his techniques was the third best in the world. One of his techniques was like the fourth. Another one was like the second. And then you had like another one was like the fifth. Like, he had several different techniques. He was not first in any of these. Do you see that even though he is considered one of the best players, if not the best player of all time in this specific sport, all of his techniques were not the best in the world. But people were fucking terrified of this guy in his prime. The reason for that is very simple. This guy could consistently, like on a consistent basis, perform all of his techniques at the top 5 level on the planet. As a result, the amount of championships this guy won is just insane. Like, you can even see it here, tour finals.
The flexibility he has compared to one person that like won in certain technique. It's
yeah.
Okay, we favor that one technique, but all that is like, what are you gonna do? At that point, you know? Well, he's like, well, I'm not the best in this, but I have flexibility, you know?
Yeah, it's flexibility in combination of the techniques. And this is what you saw with Pine, right? I'm using Pine often as an example because this guy was easily number 1 flick. Easily. Like the second person, like I don't even think there's anyone that will dare to claim second if this guy did. But all of his other techniques, they were average. No, not really average, like they were still the best, but in the pro scene, it was average. Like, if I were to give it a number, like 20 when it came to strafing. Like, what else can you put in as a skill, right? Around 30 when it came to like it was very On top of that, it was the GOATS era, so he had no real reason to practice either. And then all of this collapsed and he retired. He retired not really with a resume, I would say. Like, he didn't really achieve any goals that he set for himself. He didn't become champion. He didn't become... Well, he did become the best sniper at some point. But even then, when you saw him 1v1 other snipers, the only 1v1 this person won was based on this. It was where Flick was dominated in that specific round. Whereas if you saw Pine in a 1v1 where it wasn't really about flicks anymore, it was more about like prediction and like making micro flicks, this became irrelevant and he would lose. So all in all, I'd like to put this like the final thought to this lesson, so to say, because I'm kind of just going into circles. All in all, when you want to reach the semi-pro level, you have to set goals, get techniques, pretty much everything we spoke about, and then just work towards progress, work towards like that end game. Like, where do you want to be? For example, I would not suggest you become an Overwatch pro, because Overwatch is a dog shit game. Like, if you were to become a pro, you would have the income of a fucking hamster, because they don't pay you. There's no money to be made. So any questions about this specifically? Ah, there's still chat, okay. Chat don't work. It works now. Chat is okay. Let's see. Shatta. Ponzo. Is it Panda? Who's this? Yeah, it's Panda. Panda always uses... No, it's Oscar. What? Who's the one that uses a penguin all the time? Nah, fuck it. Chat works. It's okay. So to put finalizing on it, right? Doesn't matter what you do. You need to put in the hour. You need to put in the grind. You need to work on your technique. You need to work towards that end game. Otherwise, you're just going to be what I said in the middle, right? You're going to be hard stuck. And if you're okay with being hard stuck, which is like some people are, that's fine. You have put in the hours to become average. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you're satisfied with that result, then so be it. So, you have any questions, Chis?
No.
No. Everything is okay. So, this is just like an idea, right? SMART is something that it's mostly used in companies, like just to like put an example, like business plans. This is where you do smart ideas, or like if you build a house, you do smart ideas. Like the very first thing you would have to do with a house, like power and build a foundation and all that. And you want to avoid burnouts, because if you don't properly put in your goal, I've always been dead for a long time according to this person. If you don't put in the hours, then you will never make it. Like, for example, what I did with this guy, right? Not this guy, but an old man debuting in his 40s. Yeah, it's impressive, but it takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of practice putting in the hours. So that's that. That is the lesson on goal-oriented progress. So working towards your goals, working towards improving and making, well, not necessarily your dreams, but at least your ideas a reality. Chat got poof. I don't know why chat wasn't working. Weird. Alright. That is it for this week. We'll see what we do next week.